This is Thorin's YouTube channel. Make sure you're tuning in, hitting subscribe.
Right, this is going to be, I don't even remember what number. There is a number, though.
You said last episode you were done keeping track of things, that you were out.
I mean,
you didn't want to keep up with it.
I kept the intention of that. I just didn't execute on the details, did I? You know, part of me obviously knew unconsciously that is what I wanted to do. So it is an episode of, put it this way, Hawka's never been in any of the fucking episodes. It's the one with Hawka. that narrow it down.
Perfect. That nailed it. I like that.
So the guest for this episode is Hawka, who, if you don't know him, if you've ever watched like the B stream of an ESL event or some of those, so obviously I've immediately narrowed it down to nobody there because unfortunately, like, it's just a reality. Most people watch the A stream, but more recently, he also came through actually that ECS like caster challenge thing years back, which me and Richard made fun of because we thought it was like a cynical way to just get people into work for very little money at a time when Face It didn't want to hire some. I mean, I'll make a joke like some of the best talents in the industry. You'll know where I'm going. Listen, at this point in time, I can roast them because I literally am now basically working with their company. So what the fuck can they say?
How does that feel? How does it feel going from zero to hero? You know, what's it?
Oh, it's pretty good. Here's the thing people don't get, Moses. This is what they never get about me, is the hater will always find an angle where you lose, right? You know, whatever happens, he has to find a way that you like lost out on the deal. So what they'll obviously say, I haven't seen this, but I assume it's what the angle would be like, nah, see, when the money's there, he just went crawling back, didn't he? It's like, what's great is this just shows where people miss the point. Because my story is actually mad inspirational. One little guy from the northeast of England who just watched loads of Counter-Strike and refused to stop calling people cunts literally got massive companies worth tens of $1 million to come back to him.
Groveling,
around,
hands and knees.
Basically.
Begging.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I am gracious, though. When they come back and they're like, can we please work it? I'll say, you know what? You've done your time. I think you've learned your lesson, haven't you? That's right. So let's figure something out for 20% more money. And I will be... Yeah, go on. No, exactly, yeah. You know,
there's a lot of ways I would describe you. Gracious is exactly. No one of them.
Yeah. So anyway...
That kind of sounded like a movie trailer, though. Like,
it's pretty good.
I would go with that.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, if people saw Epicenter, Hawka obviously was doing commentary there with Sadakist, and well, it was a mixed crowd at that one.
Who would play you in a biography movie, Duncan? It'd be a young Ethan Hawke.
I was a fan of Ethan Hawke in his younger days. Actually, he was a pretty good actor. The problem is, there's not that many people who look like me who are actors. Probably an obvious joke in there, like, you know, again, gingers who are just like sort of slightly above average looks don't particularly get a lot of roles in Hollywood, I find. Probably going more with the heartthrob. Usually,
they even go bald guy over redheads.
That's true.
That's painful.
Are there even any good redheads in Hollywood nowadays? I can't even think of anyone who's ginger.
There's got to at least be a girl.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. There will, of course. Yeah, but that's also the other thing. That's the reason why I don't call myself a redhead, Moses. When I think redhead, I think, oh, smoking little hot number who's, you know, she's a bit feisty.
Yeah, you're thinking porn.
If you say ginger, you just go, all right, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, what you look like now, is exactly that's what that conjures up in your brain, isn't it? Like,
apparently, Damian Lewis from Band of Brothers.
That wouldn't be bad, actually. He's a bit older than me, but put it this way, in 10 years when I'm really reamed out. No, he is. He's ginger. When I'm really reamed out, he could play me. You know?
They've got like
I like that.
They can edit it all.
That'll be like 4 years into this B-side league. You'll have made enough money to develop a really healthy cocaine habit, and you know that's when we'll give him a call and bring.
Telling me he doesn't already have a cocaine habit?
Not officially, but anyway, this is one other thing that people don't know though about Hawka, which is interesting detail. I actually hinted as much in that article I wrote and said on Twitter, but again, a lot of like nuanced details, believe it or not, passed by the CSGO community without them picking up on it. So what I actually basically implied was that if things had gone differently with like Maui Snake's visa and some of the other people hired for Epicenter, I actually initially got Hawka in the door for that event to be my analyst. He was going to be the person along with potentially Potter, and we were going to be doing analysis because even though people know him as a commentator, because I've seen the YouTube content he's done, he actually put out a video today, I think, wasn't it? Was it today?
Yes.
So he's done a whole bunch of videos where it's a sort of similar theme to what a lot of people have tried to do, where you take like a tactic or an angle of how a match went and you break it down. I would just say the difference is some of those videos, it's like I see the content like concept and I'm like, yeah, good concept. Like that isn't a good angle, or, you know, they make a good point. But I actually think yours generally, you do a good job of making them like concise enough, but at the same time get some details. So we'll see how his analysis chops come out in this episode, because one thing, if people don't know, and I will say, there are a lot of shows out there that do have like a Google Doc with all the topic list. And, people ask before shows, like, hey, what are the topics? And I'm such an asshole, and I'm just too good at doing shows because I've done too many of them, that I just tell them, like, well, there isn't a fucking topic list. Like, I'm not making one. We just talk and that's it. And then they're just like, all right. And then I do look back on some of the episodes that really like bomb when the guests just can't talk about anything and think,
like, man, we really should have had a list of perhaps topics that we.
No, that's what I should think. I just think, man, they were shit. Never invite them again. No, obviously, I would never do anything like that. Whoever.
Definitely not.
Yeah, you can all guess which episodes of Counterpoints I'm talking about there. The ones where we absolutely hang them out to dry and then make them just look foolish, even though we could have just told them in advance to maybe look that up. But on this one, we're going to do our usual approach. We might make it more structured in the future. I haven't decided yet, but I like it personally where if people know my podcast, I like to be able to go on digressions. I like to be able to just get into one point and see how far it goes. So I don't necessarily want us to have like a set direction we're going. So I'm up for the angle that we just pick a team that we're interested in now, and I'll pick a move that we're interested in now and something going on in the scene. We just dig into that. So Hawka, I've got a question for you. This is a very pointed question. I do not necessarily expect you to know the answer to this, because I will tell you right now, I know nothing about this. So one angle that we've discussed a lot on this show the last few months for obvious reasons is Navi. Because you look at some of their players, I mean, we saw them at Epicenter. Epicenter was a perfect example of this. They either had maps where they would smash everyone and they looked like, holy fuck, they're going to win this whole thing. Or they had maps where it was like, is that even the same team? Like, they're just getting wrecked. Like, they're terrible. So everyone's first obvious thing they were saying, who looks up the stats, is you got to get rid of Guardian. Like, he was doing terribly. He was in the red every single fucking match. It felt like he obviously wasn't a very good AWPer. And even though there was a lot of reports the last few weeks that they were looking into that, apparently, based on what I know from DK's reports and hearing behind the scenes, the problem is, it's the reason why, except for Electronic Navi doesn't get the big names, unfortunately, is in the CIS region, people either have buyouts that are really nuts, which to be fair is pretty common now, or there's another implication, which I can't go into a lot, but basically it's almost like, they don't want to leave. It's like, well, can I ask him? No, he said he doesn't want to leave. It's like, well, all right, well. So I'll just make it very, very light the way I explained that there. But just imagine a Kalashnikov off the screen and then someone like, no, I don't want to leave. Like, you can see where I'm going with that.
I can't say much about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine an AK-47.
You get the premise. I think you're all with me now. So anyway, the point is, even though, yes, on the one hand, great, Guardian's gone, let's see what the new player's like. The problem is, the new player is a player from that Simon Gaming team. By the way, I refuse to call them Seaman Gaming for obvious fucking reasons. I'm going to be calling them Simon. That's going to be what I'm going to be calling them. So that team from Simon Gaming, which if you remember, was in the first stage of the major last year, and actually at one point in time was surprising people, as nearly always happens with the CIS teams, where because no one knows them, they think, right, they must all be shit, and then usually they surprise you in the first best of ones or whatever, because you expect them to be so terrible, but they might have good aim, or maybe like in the case of more recently Forza, they actually had tactics in that team. So do you know anything about the Simon Gaming team? Do you know anything about this player, Perfecto, or whatever his name is, who's potentially being joining now?
Honestly, not really. Simon to me were always the team that they came to that one major, and then I don't even see them in the online tournaments I cast, which is really weird to me. I don't think they've even played much recently, so I guess the way I'm going at it with is, I mean, I don't know much about him, but he'll probably be better than Guardian, realistically. And obviously there's the aspect of putting Simple back onto the AWP, which seems to be the case. And that's got to be a massive benefit for the team. Even if he just picks it up whenever he wants to, that's going to be such an upside to have him have that freedom.
What did you actually think of Guardian in the team, though? Were you one of the people who was riding as hard against it? Because I know some people thought, just give him a few months more, maybe he has to just figure where his head's at or whatever.
I mean, it does feel kind of quick, but I also didn't see him getting, much better. It's weird because you always look at Navi and you think they have enough firepower anyway, so you don't feel like they need to make changes, but at the same time, Guardian's stats were pretty bad. I do think also that the other thing you have to talk about in this Navi team is Boomich still is quite inexperienced as an in-game leader. I don't think the only problem was Guardian on this team. So that's something that you could have definitely thought about when you're looking at this roster. But I definitely think just bring in Perfecto, see how that goes. And they should still be able to compete top 5 in the world just with the firepower, you'd think.
Yeah, there's actually a detail on that, Moses, that you might not have seen online that I can reveal, because it wasn't heavily emphasized, bizarrely, which is it turns out that at Epicenter, only on the playoff games, not in the group stage. I believe they said it was only on the playoff games. In the playoff games, it was like those dream hacks where you could just talk as the coach during the rounds. Yeah. So the reason why that was really shocking is because when we saw, like, another flaw I thought Navi had was the reason why they would have games where they were crap is, like, tactically they looked like a team where unless plan A worked, there was no plan B. It's like they just ran into a brick wall and they were just done. Like, they didn't adapt. And so that's why if you look at the teams that were playing well against them, yeah, it was people like Stanislaw from EG who just mid-rounds all the time, and once he gets a lock on what you do, he would just win the map. Once he got kind of like the rhythm of what you were doing, it was over. So the reason why that actually shook me when I found out that apparently Blade could have been talking, I don't know if he was, I will say, but he had the potential to be, is because what you think is the angle that Hawka said there, which is like, well, fair enough, you know, Boomich is a new leader, especially to the top level. He obviously never had weapons like Simple and Electroid before. You know, maybe he's like going to take more time to learn how to do it, and Blade's going to implement that. So I don't know if he was talking, but if Blade had in any way have been like calling any of those rounds or being able to literally say, like, you know, instead of having to have timeouts, just say on the fly, like, no, this is wrong, then I'm kind of shocked because I've always thought Blade was a pretty sick in-game leader personally. So I thought that would be... should have made like a good compromise in a way.
Yeah, probably on paper, you can write it out that way to sound good. I don't like this Navi team at all. I don't like the direction that it's gone in any way. They're still going to be good. They're still going to compete. But I feel like they just have so many different elements of different philosophies. Like Blade coming in was an in-game leader, remember, in like Flip Side, and he had some cool things, but like he obviously did not, you know, he didn't adapt, and like the younger players didn't want to play with him. He became an in-game leader, and then you know, someone who people just didn't really want to play for. He was off the team. I think they just have these weird elements. Boomich coming in as a new player. Remember, Flamey used to play back in the day, and he was kind of under tutelage, and he's been around for a while now. And it feels like they just have all these good players, and maybe this is why the skill never actually reaches the level that we feel it should, but they all like seemingly, it feels like they want to play different ways. And I don't know if there's any cohesiveness or anything cohesive about this team that I see when I watch them play. I think Navi's in a really scary spot just with grasping at straws for their fifth. You know, the Guardian thing is sad because, you know, I had this tweet exchange with Nell this morning where it was just like, yeah, I agree. Guardian probably just needed a few more months and a change of scenery, but this was supposed to be his change of scenery. This was supposed to be him coming up. This was his chance. And the unfortunate thing is, no matter how Guardian's stats looked through 2019, for me, it felt very obvious that he wasn't someone who was putting any work into updating the style that he wanted to play, updating the way that he played the game, updated the moves he made in the game. He became very stale.
I actually talked to him a little bit, like occasionally I'll exchange Twitter DMs, and he basically intimated something similar. Like he himself thought he could be better, but it was more along the lines like, you know, I'll have to like get some time off and put some work in or something, which is like, I get why older players are like that. Like, you know, you've basically been grinding for like 15 years or something, just playing every day. So part of you wants like an off season for real and to like not play for a while. But the problem is, in the modern day, people are just going to think you washed up. Like, I'm sorry, if I had to bet now, I'd probably put my chips there. But so if he comes back, it'll be for a different team, unfortunately. It'll have to be in like 3 months. Yeah.
I think if I'm Guardian, what I do is I take 2 to 3 months off and I really decide if I want to keep playing, if I really want to work hard and get back into the grind and become a better player and reinvent yourself the way we've seen Kenny S, JW, all those, you know, the other 2 oppers that were around him in the early stages of CSGO, they've all found ways to be successful and fit into the current game. And if I'm him, I look at this new league that popped up that's going to have, you know, it's not going to have every single one of the best teams in the world, but I'm going to say I need to get good enough so that when season 2 of this rolls around, one of these teams.
Oh, there's opportunity to get signed as a big name, of course.
Because he's still going to be a big name. And even if you say he's washed up, you're always going to think of the potential of how good he used to be. And even if he just got to like 75% of that, right, he's still going to be a benefit to certain teams. So for him, it's just about deciding, like in my head, I'm just like, that has to be a mental thing, whether it's something in personal life or whether you're just not feeling motivated. It looked to me like he wasn't actually working and practicing as hard as he could have been. And I'm sure there's plenty of reasons for that in the dysfunctional phase that we saw last year. But, you know, take some time off, figure out what you want, and you're going to be valuable when you come back or when you figure it out, once you dedicate yourself to becoming a better player again.
And the other angle, which obviously Hawker already mentioned, is to me, like, yeah, you can do, since I don't know this player from Simon Game, like, I won't say shit or something or whatever, I just won't make any assumption about him at all. Everyone I saw, though, said he was just like a kind of a standard rifle player, and it's, don't think he's going to be super sick, but then, like, the joke is everyone just says he's just not Guardian and he doesn't have to have the AWP, so the joke is like, it's got to be better than that, right? So the real angle that's exciting is the idea that Simple's back on the AWP and that he wants to be and that the team wants him to be, because that angle I do think is fun, because that means if this guy is just even slightly better than Guardian and just fills a rifle role, and then Simple can get anywhere close, like, I won't say I'll guarantee he'll get back to that form, because that form is probably the best we've ever seen in CSGO. Like, personally, I don't give a fuck what anyone says on a ranking. I ranked Zewu the #1 player, but that's just because of factors like Navi just kind of collapsed towards the end of the year, and Simple didn't even go to as many tournaments. Like, it's hard to give him the edge. I couldn't really make a good case, but I'm definitely not. I don't think personally that Simple carrying in 2018 was like when Zewu was at his best in 2019. Because I do think, memes from Alex aside, that they do actually set Zewu up a lot more. He does have, like, sometimes like a fucking butler just next to him, like, servicing him, and he does get all the grenades and stuff. Whereas, like, I remember Prime Simple, some of that shit, he would just, like, entry as well. He was doing everything. So, like, I'm not trying to take anything away from Zewu. My point is, he's just not the greatest player to ever play CSGO. It's not really much of a diss. So to me, that first of all, like, I do think this is an obvious way you can make what you already have better. Like, one thing that was very weird when I watched Simple at Epicenter is at the very end of that Navi lineup with Guardian, they legitimately sometimes used him as like a space creator. Like, he would create space for someone else to come into. That's why, if you ever looked at his stats, they would never be bad. They would always be good. But the eye test in the game, you were like, I never see any highlight rounds. Like, what is he doing anything? But if you looked at the stats at the end, he still had fire stats. Like, it still looked really good. Like, ADR was always good, kills. But it wasn't like Simple. Like, the impact wasn't there in the same way. So if you can bring back the old Simple like that, I'm very excited for that. And I'll also say, to tie it into what I just said, the dream for me is, let's actually have Simple back in his prime. Again, Zewu in his prime. That's what I wanted to see. Because that was the real problem. When Simple was at his best was earlier last year. And that was actually when they basically almost never met. Like, they were kind of like just drifting in different circles. So we never really got the proper head-to-head. You don't often get the real head-to-head, like the two super bangers at the same time, if you notice.
Yeah, that's what I was going to transition into, was picking who we think might be the best player this year is kind of interesting, because Zewu was obviously very, very good. I don't know if Vitality are quite at the level of a top team in my eyes, though, just with not really having like a clear second star. Like, Alex looked good at Epicenter, but I feel like he has these tournaments occasionally where he has good impact. It's not like they have a really standout second player. Simple on Navi looks like it could be promising if he goes back to taking more roles and playing more like we used to know how Simple used to play. But again, Navi are kind of in a similar boat. I guess you could say Device, obviously, on Astralis, but he just seems to be perennial like second or third place player. So it's really interesting, obviously, between those three. And then obviously you have Elysian there, because we don't know what Liquid are going to do off the back of the player break. Like, there's a load of ways I could see it going in 2020. That's definitely exciting, I think, heading into this year.
The only thing is, of those names, I agree with all those names. Like, they could all obviously be the #1 player of the year in theory. The big problem that Elige has is an even worse version of Device's problem. Like, Device's problem at the moment is basically how people in the NFL who don't think Tom Brady's the greatest player of all time, like, I personally don't, whatever, suck my dick, I don't give a fuck. But one of the reasons that we always say is, unfortunately, he does have elements to his team that are, like, every quarterback wishes they could have, like that coach and certain times the defense, it's like the problem Device has is his way to win MVPs is to be the best player on the team that wins. That's the logic by which you give him the... And by the way, as a result, he's won the most MVPs in history because his team's been fabulously successful. So that's what Elijah was basically doing in the summer. The logic was Liquid wins the tournament. Then you look at the overall tournament. Elijah's the most consistent of the star players. He probably edges the MVP vote. But the problem he has, as you've probably seen if I have set it up, is he needs Liquid to win the tournament really to do that. Because when you have monsters like Zewu and Simple out there, it's almost unfair. Like, if they just make the final and lose, they're probably going to win the MVP no matter what the fuck you do in the other team. So it's tough to be the #1 player in a... Like, that's why I actually really do sort of feel for Device, because it's like, you just picked the wrong period of time in history, unfortunately, to have all these amazing years back to back to back to back, because there's certain areas in CS history where you would have just been the #1 player doing exactly what you did. You wouldn't even have to do anything more than that. You don't always have a monster who's even in a position to win. Like, when Nico was sick in mouse spots, he was never going to be the #1 player because he was on mouse spots,
Device is that player I feel like you just give him the number one spot in your head because you feel bad that he doesn't have it. Like, I know when I see these lists, I'm just like, you know what? I don't even give a fuck. Device is the best player of 2019, just because you're just like, this is so unreasonable how good the guy is. But I want to stick with Navi because I really don't feel comfortable going into this year with this team at all. I still look at them and I just say we've gone back in time. This is like Groundhog's Day with Navi. You still now just have the win conditions. Like Simple's going to go back to the op, unless this guy. Sorry, not Poison. What's his name?
Perfecto, I think.
Perfecto. What? Jesus Christ! It sounds like a terrible Spider-Man villain. Unless he turns out to be some kind of like savant and some kind of like crazy good player that we just didn't know about, you're still going to sit there and say, this is exactly how they started the year last year, which is Electronic and Flamey have to deliver. Because we've seen plenty of games, we've seen plenty of years, we've seen plenty of events where Simple can hard carry, as Duncan, you just referenced, that unbelievable 2018 that he had, and they're still not winning events, like many events, as many as they should for someone who's playing at that level. You still go back to those win conditions. You still go back to the in-game leadership, which is a big question mark. The coaching, which I still feel is a question mark, and the reliability of Flamey and Electronic at Stars. They've had pretty up and down careers, especially Flamey. So there's nothing that has made me feel any better about Navi coming into this year. And it's just a weird thing. They're still going to be good. They're still going to be dangerous, but I'm not really excited about this team in any way.
I'll also say as well, like, as a general rule, the position I'm always the most nervous about replacing is in-game leader, and especially if you're removing like a legendary in-game leader for someone who's new. Because if you just look, you'd be hard-pressed to find any year where the top 5 teams in CS had some brand new in-game leader as their IGL. If you actually look, it's funny because if you went back in time, there used to be a lot of great in-game leaders who never won the major. Like, obviously, at one point in time, Zeus hadn't, Karrigan hasn't. Like, there's a lot of them that haven't necessarily had the ultimate success. But look how long they stick around for, because like what they can do is just proven. Whereas like it's hard, like, except for like at the moment, basically Golden on Fnatic's the only person you can even bring up as far as I can tell. And even then, no one really quite knows, is he that good? Is he only good with these players? Like, there's a lot of angles on that. So the problem is, you can definitely criticize Zeus. And as an individual player, I think he deserved a lot of criticism. But as an IGL, I always thought he did his job. And I always thought there's a reason why yes, you play his style, but it works. Like, it was fairly consistent as a style. So that's why on the Boomich angle, like, I actually think individually Boomich is better than Zeus. I think it's pretty clear. But as an IGL, I don't see the same level. So I think that's a concern. What are you going to say, Hawka?
I think like it would have been nice if like when I think of this Navi team, I don't really think of many of the players as being able to kind of make like secondary calls either. Like, it would be nice if there was a sort of player that maybe had that sort of more overall tactical sort of understanding of the game. But I don't feel like Simple has that. I just feel like he's, a prodigy and is just going to do what he does. Flamey's very quiet. He's not going to be making any calls, I don't think. I don't feel like Electronic's that kind of player either, and I doubt Perfecto coming into the team will be. So It's really not easy to transition, I think, for Boomich, like you were saying, into this team. Whereas if there was maybe, a more experienced player in there who was kind of able to make some secondary calls, I'm sure that would have helped a lot. But yeah, Boomich definitely a better player, but there's time, I think, to see if he can get better at the in-game leading side of things. And it's kind of hard to know which way that one's going to go.
I'm with you on that, by the way. Like basically, that's another thing I think about a lot of teams. Unless you really have like the god tier IGL, like a Karrigan or a Glaive, who can probably just do it on their own. A lot of what makes other teams great is the reason you keep a core as well is sometimes you have like, it's like a brain trust. You have like 2 or 3 people who are all on the same wavelength. Like Astralis is the obvious example, but you can go with other ones. Like, in my opinion, I know everyone memed him to death, but I always used to give this as my reason as to why they never cut AZ from North. And it's because MSL just decided, like, we just get each other, like, whatever it is. Like, I understand the way he wants to play. We're on the same level. We're both shit. No, obviously that's a joke, but no, but like, there's a reason they both stuck around basically the whole time in North until the bitter end. Like, Like, you kind of do want someone who either gets your system or, like you're saying, I mean, a good example, if you want to use the Zeus case, is when Zeus was in Gambit, the reason why people probably did overrate Zeus in Gambit is because they didn't realize that Adren as a secondary caller was like a very intelligent player on that level. His problem was as a main IGL, he just wasn't good, which is often the case with the guys you're talking about, actually. The people who are good at the secondary calling, that's the guy basically where you're making a lot of the calls and he just sometimes comes in like, I'm not sure, maybe we do this. But it's like, because he only has to make like the short circuit move or the throw in the one wacky idea, it's super valuable. It's basically the problem, if people don't know, with what's happened in the ENCE team, is that from what I've heard, Alu played that role and then he made this classic mistake, as people like Adren did, of thinking, I should just take over as the main IGL. And it's like, that is a very different role.
How hard can it be?
Yeah, which is what they always think until they have to do it. And I always say, it's not until you are IGL in a game where nothing works, you've just lost the first map, which is your map pick, you're getting your head smashed in, and you're drained, you've tried every... Like, that's the moment where the real IGLs, they don't give up, do they? They're just doing it for their life.
Yeah, but this kind of discussion, like, again, I think this is one of those conversations that works as like a theory among like analysts talking on a podcast. But if you're on that team, this conversation just becomes a flaw in your team. If you're looking for like a second IGL, like, you need to have all 5 players able to read the map and be able to make the call. And I guarantee that's why Astralis is so goddamn good. I guarantee that all 5 of them know exactly where people are positioned on the map, and when they kind of start to understand the rotations of their opponent, all 5 of them are able to make a call, and all 5 players would listen to that call and trust in it. And that's how you get such an epic team. And if you're Navi, or I mean, frankly, if you're any of these teams in the top 10, if you don't have at least 4 players who are making calls and who can just say this rotation happened, or, oh, you got this pick here, and like all of a sudden click and say we need to attack the B bomb site right now, that's an issue. Like, you cannot wait that long for information to be processed by the in-game leader or the second caller. It does have to be that instantaneous. And that's a huge flaw. If you're looking at this Navi lineup, and I agree, Flamey is not someone who's going to be ultra talkative. I think Electronic is probably pretty talkative. I think Simple maybe more so, but I mean, if you start getting down this list and you're thinking there's not a whole lot of players who are going to be able to make a read and make a call in the mid round, like that's a whole other basket of issues before you even get to, a secondary caller. Those guys need to be way, way more talkative.
I'll even give you an example, actually, that I think backs that up, which is one of the teams that actually I think caught a lot of people off by surprise at the end of the year was Fnatic. Like, when they put that lineup back together, I thought, like, okay, cool, maybe they're like the 9th best team, but who gives a fuck, right? And then if you look at their results, they're amazing, their results. And if you look at how many, like, except for that one final against Mousespots at EPL, even when they lose, it's super competitive. They're always in the game. Well, one of the reasons I would say why that is, first of all, obviously that core has played together forever and has amazing chemistry. But I'd add in as well. So on that particular team, I actually personally think at the moment, just as an individual player, Flush is the worst player on the team. But if Flusher is your worst player, he can definitely do all that stuff. He is a savant at the game. Of course, he has like a crazy way of seeing the game and can make calls and knows how to create a play and take initiative. Like, again, if that's your worst player, to kind of put to your point, Moses, that's a pretty good foundation to have. And then he can bring a guy like Broline, because it's only one guy coming in who's learning the game. The problem in the Navi squad is, right, Simple and Electronic are amazing at what they do, but do they fit with some of the others? And do people like now you've got Boomich and this other guy coming in the game? Like, it does feel a bit disjointed. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I think the thing that Navi do have is that Simple can just kind of, on a more individual basis, just do something where he does open up the map, even if he doesn't kind of see the game on the macro level. So that can be something you can like try and take advantage of, but it's just kind of making sure that you actually can make the most of that and making sure you have the more cerebral players in and around him, which again, it's hard to know with sort of some of the newer players coming into Navi, but it doesn't really feel like they have that based on what we've been seeing.
Also, I have to say as well, even though like individually, if you ever talk to him, Simple is like a really intelligent guy. Like, he's one of those guys who can remember like every Molotov that he has to do in the game and every spot that someone plays. But I will say this, he is an example of someone, where there's that famous thing people say in sports, Moses, like you actually don't want someone like Michael Jordan to try and be like the coach of a team, because he would be the worst coach ever. Because the joke is like the way he sees the game, obviously everything that's possible to him would never be I can't even imagine if Simple was the IGL of a team. Like, how the fuck would he be calling? Like, because obviously his version of what's a reasonable peak or like an attack.
Just be telling people to walk up through a ramp and through a smoke.
It's so unreasonable, wouldn't it?
All right, guys, let's all take it in turns to win 1v5s and then we'll just win, right?
Exactly. It's so unreasonable, wouldn't it? So, like, the funny thing about Navi, I think, is if I summarize it, they've clearly got the talent to be really good. You see it in flashes. But that's the problem. They don't have, like every other team, there's no, like, coherent structure. And there's definitely not the vision of one great in-game leader. So, at the moment, it's like, they actually have the opposite problem they used to have. They used to have, like, as much as they had some really sick players in a couple of them, they actually had slightly just under the amount of firepower they probably needed to win, which is why they used to just narrowly lose in the semis or whatever. Now they have the skills of the CIS region, but actually the irony is, listen, as much as I'm a critic of someone like Jim, tell you what, that Virtus Pro team has a totally coherent style. Like, they actually know how to play together. Like, they have tactics, etc. So it's just weird that they've ended up in that scenario. Because I agree, it's hard to look at a team like that and think you're going to win championships. Because if anything, this is where I knew that people who said Simple couldn't be the best because they didn't win many trophies, like, didn't see the game the same way as me. Because I'd go the other way. I'd say Simple is literally the test case that Counter-Strike isn't about one player winning the game. Because if he can do that shit and doesn't win the game, nobody can just win the game on their own. Like, in fact, it actually means, I have to be honest, when I look back at some of the teams in history that won a bunch of championships that I sometimes thought were, like, hard carried by one guy, some of them probably do deserve more credit on some of the complementary parts. Because at the very worst, almost kind of like Vitality somewhat round Ziwu, I always say, stats-wise, a bunch of them actually aren't very impressive at all. But whenever you watch them with the eye test, a lot of them do their job, actually. And you can see how that working around a godlike player could win Nicky a few trophies here and there. It makes sense.
Yeah, but
I still personally wish they could have an upgrade to that team too, though. Like, there's a few players I'd love to bring into that squad. And I think that could be a number one squad if you change one or two players.
Well, the problem, that's the real thing, because the problem is if you're sitting here and you see Vitality at number 6 and you're saying, yeah, they have Zaiwu and then like 4 guys who just do their job, like, that means they've hit their ceiling. Like, if you only have 4 guys who are just like, you're not going any higher than that. You're not beating the Fanatics. You're not going to beat the EGs, the Liquids consistently. Mouse Sports is going to be tough. Astralis is going to be like almost unobtainable. So, yeah, we touched on Vitality a bunch. I think that team, it's so weird. And this almost seems harsh, but I can't get this thought out of my head that Vitality, and it's not probably a new thought, but they just feel like a tier 2 team with Zaiwu, and then they have Zaiwu. Like, I look at the parts of this team and I'm like, they shouldn't be number 6. Like, how did they get here?
Put it this way, I'm not saying, because like I said before, I don't think he carries in the same way that Simple did, where it's literally like the joke in Navi when Simple was on form was, I used to get insanely tilted if they had a round where he had a Deagle and one guy had an AK and it was Zeus or Edward, because it's like, mate, he can on his own win this round if you give him that AK. Like, that really is what you want to do with this guy. You want to be like Kenny S 2015, just give him the gun, he might win the round for you. The difference is Ziwu needs like the whole team on, but I will say this, when I watched the final of Epicenter when they were playing Mouse Sports, I know Mouse Sports like said they were burned out and, you know, like they weren't too broken up about losing. But if I was playing in that game and I was them, I'd be like, what the fuck? We should have won this 2-0. Like they would get into so many scenarios, like a post plan. They would get the first kill. And in a normal round against a normal team who don't have a Simple or a Ziwu, you just win the round at that point, like, you know, like 80%. But what would happen is when you would run around the corner, Ziwu would just kill the first 2 people. And then it's like 10 seconds have gone by in the round. Suddenly, like, it's an even round scenario. And you're thinking like, the fuck, this is unfair. It's like they've got the cheat code or something.
Yeah. Who would you put as a had a bigger carry, or Duncan, Kenny S 2015 or Simple 2018?
Well, the thing is, Kenny S, I think, was just a shorter time span, so it's easier to say Simple in that sense.
Was it not the whole year, Kenny S, that like Titan?
No, because the problem is that the AWP nerf was like almost like April 1st, and then he was also very, very good the previous year before. So if you don't go calendar year, he definitely was like very strong. And I'll say this. One of the reasons when I made that video, I was very, very emphatic about how sick he was, is because when I even went back and watched demos to do my research and refresh my memory, the thing that I'd forgotten as well was, you would obviously think the logical thing you could say that would be the flaw of Kenny S compared to Ziwu and Simple is, well, he's not that great a rifler. He's just like he's like an above average rifler back then. He wasn't a monster. Like, they obviously was sick rifles on their own. I'll tell you what, he didn't need to be, because like his no scopes were so mental. It's like, again, like I said, you would drop him a glass cannon AWP, he would still get kills. Like, it was the only AWPer ever where it wasn't a limitation that he was an AWPer. That was always an upside. Like, you was like, yeah, just get him it.
He also had the CZ and the Tech 9, so
those existed too. Yes,
didn't really need rifles at that.
But no, like put it this way. I mean, I don't know if I'm about to make a reach here, but I'll go for it anyway. I'll just say this. right? When I look at the Vitality team, I admit the one big problem they have is they want French players, and there just isn't another sick French player at the moment that would frag heavily. I know everyone says Kyo, but I think there's a reason people don't want to play with him, unfortunately, so I don't even know if he's on the table. Unfortunately, that has now gone into the territory of, like, saying bring back Scream or something. It's like, yeah, it's not a bad idea, but it'll just never happen, unfortunately. You know, like, it just feels like it's not even a great hypothetical if it can never happen. So if you're trying to actually replace players, it is tough to do it. Like, for example, one player I have to say, I have to give begrudging respect to every time I watch is Jax from G2. I don't know how this guy actually made himself a very serviceable player, especially in those like entry roles. He seems to know what the fuck he's doing, but it's not like he brings firepower. So I don't know if that would even upgrade Vitality if you had him, you know. It's just another piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the French scene is all sorts of messed up. I don't even like remember for years we were just like, when is the Swedish scene going to start getting younger? When is the Swedish scene going to start getting younger? Well, the French scene did it first, and now we're just sitting there like, don't go to young players, French scene. Like, you don't have any. They're not good at, like, I don't know what happened to their scene, but they have no one to bring up. No one seems prepared.
I'll tell you the sad one is the player I thought might one day be on Vitality, but the moment he looks washed and like he's jumped the shark is Amanek. He actually had, I told you, I didn't buy into the hype when he was on the Misfits team because I thought, yeah, he's playing like tier 2, like, you know, like that, and he's playing with not that great teammates.
Tier 2 and an A.
And then the problem is, though, when he got to G2, he was looking pretty fucking good at first, actually. I thought, right, legit, he's one of those guys where, you know, you put him to a higher level, he rises to the higher level. He's looked pretty bad the last few months I've seen him play, actually. He's looked like probably the worst player in that team. So that was supposed to be some of the firepower. That's a hybrid player.
Yeah.
Do you have anyone you'd pick, Hawkers? Anyone you can think of that you would want to put in Vitality?
Not like right now. I know that on Heretics, like they've recently brought in Jane, who's pretty young and looks kind of exciting just because of how new he is, and he's like putting up decent numbers. But outside of G2 and Vitality, there just aren't teams really in France that are like too exciting to me. So like there's no one that stands out. Like you said, like Amanek had a period where I thought he could have definitely been the one, but it's kind of slowed down recently. So there's definitely not like an obvious choice.
Especially because I'll even add in, I heard that he did like temporarily was the IGL and was a secondary caller. So there's another angle you could have even given him like, oh, maybe this will work. Maybe it'll bring a whole new dimension to the team, but whatever. We'll put that one to one side. Right. What about this then, Hawker? You pick a team. Is there a team you're interested in?
How low do you want to go? I mean, I did that video on Mad Lions recently.
Dealer's choice, baby.
Mad Lions feels like a stretch.
It does feel like a stretch. I know. I mean, they're probably the second best team in Denmark right now, for what that's worth.
I thought he was going to say in B-site for a second. Listen, you cheeky little twat. You're probably right, but how fucking dare you? Like,
they beat Mouse Sports in Budapest. That's all that matters.
That's true.
That's so fucked up.
That is true. That's another thing, by the way. There's a good example of, like, that's obviously the extreme case of it, but there's an example of the value of the IGL. Like, it's not a meme, and Hunden himself knows it. He is individually a very below par individual player. Like, it's not like he's not trying. He's definitely grinded the hours, etc. But, like, especially once you take him out of, like, the top 10 teams where they have the other good IGLs, he almost toys with these fucking tier 2 and tier 3 IGLs. Like, this guy is like levels above them. Like, literally, if you think it's bad for some of the other players who like, I'm Daps and I always get my players taken. Like, he gets his players taken like 2 years before you in the equivalent time span. Like, he has to literally find them in the bargain bin, show they're good, and then the second he shows they're good, someone goes, Snappy goes, I'll have him, thanks, mate. And he goes, back to the bargain bin, and he always finds them. That's the crazy
Here's
thing.
the question though: why has nobody like, let's say, you know, struggling Danish team that has never lived up to expectations? Someone like North never been like, you know what, we've tried MSL, we've tried this way, it hasn't worked. Let's give Hunden the chance. Like, I agree, he's had some great players go through him, but there's got to be some critical flaw that makes it so players, like, is it really just that he's not individually good enough? Like, why has he never been in position to have the second best team? If he can bring these players up and get them snatched away from his hands, what's keeping him from just becoming the second best in-game leader in Denmark?
Yeah, I mean,
like, why is he not? That's my big question around Hunden. I don't know the answer. I'm not like actually posing that question. True. It's just I have no clue what's holding him back. If he's done so many, when he does these good things for so long, he's got a track record, a resume.
Yeah, the thing I always find with his teams is that like that there's not much I can say that they do wrong, but they sometimes do just come up short against the top tier opposition. Also, his individual level definitely is obviously bad. I think when we were watching Vitality at Epicenter, we were saying we think they might be switching up their CT setups just so that people don't know where ZywOo is, so that they can't just avoid ZywOo. I feel like, if you've got Hunden on your team, you kind of have to do the opposite, where you switch up Hunden's position just so that he doesn't get exploited every round. Like, that could legit be a thing.
That could certainly be a downside, yeah.
Well, that would also answer my question as well right there.
Yeah,
I'll also throw in, though, I do agree, actually, with the premise, Moses, which is, if you consider, bearing in mind, they kicked MSL quite a while ago in North before they brought him back. They did try all these other combos, like Cadian, like that was a weird one to me. I understood the Valde one. If your star player, who you hope stays in the team, says, I want to be IGL, it's like, right, just let him do whatever the fuck he has to do to stay, basically.
Also, he knows what the fuck he's talking about. Like, when you hear him talk about Counter-Strike, you're like, okay,
he's a very smart guy. Yeah. But put it this way, while they still had Valde, that's when I would have liked them to have maybe given Hunden a try. Like, do it as a last resort thing. You're like, while you still have Valde, obviously, if you had, again, if Hunden can really work his magic, and if he can be the fucking player whisperer and bring Yugi to form, I think that would be case closed right there. If he can do that, he's a fucking miracle. That's like Mr. Miyagi at the end of the first Smoke spoilers, when he does that fucking and he heals his broken leg or some dumb shit like that. Like, I don't even know what that was supposed to be still in that move, but it worked. Whatever. Suspension of disbelief. It made the crane kick work. So.
Listen, he captured a fucking mosquito with chopsticks, and here you are not questioning that at all. Although I bet there's some motherfucker out there who can do
Someone
that.
Could probably do that. Someone really skilled.
It's worth it while we're talking about
Woxic or something. With his super high sense. That's probably what it's like trying to aim the AWP for him. It's like he's got fucking 13.337 sense or whatever, hasn't he? He's just like, I am Lee Tax, or just fucking wrecks you. By the way, he's one player where you know it's already traditional that when players come up who are really skilled, and especially explosive players, they always get accused of cheating. Not a single person when he came up who called him a cheat should ever have to apologise. Because if you even watched the demo, you'd think he was using an aimbot, wouldn't you? Like, when you see those flicks, it must be an aimbot. No one could do this.
That's pretty unreal. Speaking of mad lines, though, while we're on the subject, Boobski was also Boobski, whatever. Yeah, Boobski is also... was also the prediction for Dupree to be like a breakout player this year. So he's got that behind him.
Do you have any insight on him for us, Hawka?
He's really skilled. What I've noticed when I was watching their demos is he loves to just go back to the same spot over and over again and just try and take the same aim fight, which can sometimes work. And then sometimes eventually just gets countered, which I found kind of weird. But yeah, he's I think probably the most skilled player on this team. Definitely, again, the weird thing with the Mad Lions type squads is I definitely look at this roster and I think, these players have potential. But then you look at someone like Borat, for example, who was actually picked up by North, and then when they go to a different team, sometimes Heroic. It doesn't transition. Oh yeah, Heroic. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. So it's kind of strange. You kind of wonder how much of it is kind of Hunden propping them up, because I don't know if he's necessarily the smartest player.
No, actually, well, that's the interesting thing, was because when we were at Epicenter, and obviously that's where Heroic actually made top 4, they had a pretty good run. Since the two teams, Heroic and Force, who made the playoffs, were teams that Potter had basically watched the entire year, because they went to every fucking DreamHack they could attend, and they were even playing each other in a bunch of them. She said basically every time we would talk about Borup that the problem was when he was in Hunden's team, he was the setup to be the star player basically, and then they'd brought him into Heroic and they'd kind of just given him whatever one of the positions that was available by someone else leaving or something, and so that makes a lot of sense to me, because that's actually, by the way, one of the things in history that has fucked a lot of rising talent or held them back a year, where you get the call up to the big squad. The famous examples of this were Get Right in Forest squads, or back in the day Heaton and Potty squads, because the problem was when these players were at their peak, they not only have their roles, they even have their spots on maps. You just can't have that spot if you play that spot on a map. So what happens is you can't turn down the offer to join that team because you think it's your dream. You think it's your chance to go to the big leagues. But what you don't know is you might be walking into a situation, a spot, a role you have never played. You might have never even tried to play. And so that's an example of where I don't write him off straight away. Maybe they'll figure it out with him. Maybe he'll adapt to this role, but that's definitely one of the issues if you go from being the big fish in the small pond to just another guy on the team, where the problem is they're looking at you and saying yeah, you're good, but we're supposed to be just as good as you, so why don't we give you our spot? So I think that's a tough one because I heard a lot of the hype around Borup, but the problem is I don't watch many of the Tier 2 tournaments. And so when I was watching at Epicenter, I was mad underwhelmed, but the logic made sense. I'll say the rationale there's a basis to it, I think, in the game.
I think the fun thing I know about Mad Lions, Anders and I cast them in those finals in Budapest. I really liked watching. I thought Roge, however you want to say it, I think he's pretty fun to watch. I think. He was pretty solid. And Acor, listen, this isn't the best team in the world. Obviously, they are a lot of fun to watch because Acor actually tries to bust out 2015 style JW whopping. And it's crazy seeing players try and do it as aggressively as he does at times. So, I mean, there's some, I think this team is going to be a lot of fun to watch, even if they're not going to be any big knockout punches that they'll deliver. But that's a pretty cool team, especially in a region that is so difficult to stand out or get noticed in. Speaking of which, I guess, I don't know. I feel like I ask this question every 4 months or so, but where the fuck is Refrezh? Where's this Danish guy gone? Where's he
playing on some not great team? Last time I remember, he went to some tier 3 Danish. I don't know if he's still playing for them.
He hasn't played an official match since October, but all I remember is him standing in for Cloud9 in Lisbon for Blast. Yeah, it was in Lisbon, and he was awesome. And then I never saw anything from him again. I thought he did great at that event. So I mean, there's got to be something there. But why is no one picking this guy up? He was amazing, I thought.
In the NiP squad now, which, listen, I totally get that everyone hates the NiP organization, and that probably will in the future handicap them from ever getting any of the Fnatic players, for example. But if you actually look at the group of talent they have in the NiP squad, based on the things I'd heard about Nork and the fact that they have Threat as a coach, I'm quietly interested in that team, actually. I feel like there could be some potential there. So what are your thoughts, Hawka? Do you know much about Nork? Do you know much about the potential of this squad?
I've heard the same things about Nork, and the weird thing to me is he was playing on this Gamer Legion team that seemed to switch players just so often that I couldn't really understand kind of how he played as an AWPer. The one tournament I think I actually got to properly cast him at, they had Draken standing in, so they just had 2 AWPers, and it was very strange. He was pretty mediocre at that tournament. He didn't do anything too memorable. So for me, it's kind of the same. I'm watching what he can do on NiP because I didn't really get to see much of him at that event. He was pretty quiet from what I saw. Definitely think that NiP, again, have potential. It's just a case of how much can that get realized? And I don't know. I'm not massively excited, like you're saying. It's one that I'll keep an eye on, but I'm not holding out hope or anything, I guess.
I don't know much. Actually, I don't know anything about Nock, but I will say this. When he comes in and steps into Force, you're going to have to make up in chemistry and cohesion and everyone, all these young players being on the same page. You're going to have to use those things to make up for the fragging that Forrest brought to the table, because he was just an animal. Forrest was just someone who could just deathmatch and get you 2 kills and open up a round. And he was really incredible in this weird resurgence that NIP had at the end of last year. So right off the bat, Nock has huge shoes to fill, from a legendary player sense to the fact that just production in the game, he's got to pick it up in there as well. So this is a big risk, but I mean, they had to do it. It's not like NiP is making this decision. Forrest obviously leaving. So, I mean, maybe it's not so much of a risk. It's just they just kind of have to go for it. But I will say, I didn't expect anything from NiP at the end of last year either. They surprised and they overcame it. So Twist is playing really well. Rez is playing well. I think Plopsky, I think secretly is one of the stronger players on this team in my mind. Yeah. I think he's a pretty solid. He's not one of those guys who's going to get headlines or get highlights, but again, my kind of player who I think is very fundamentally sound, makes good decisions, isn't flashy. So they've got some cool pieces, and we'll just have to see how Nock does.
My take on that team, like I said, first of all, there is talent there. And yes, it's true, probably some of it's talent for the future, maybe a year from now. In fact, if you notice, go back a while ago, anyone, on any of my talk shows, I was the one who nailed I won't say I nailed Broland, listen, Americans will just be like, what the fuck? Listen, y'all know what I meant. But what I mean is I nailed the opinion on him, because I never said he wouldn't make it. What I said was, yeah, maybe in a year, give someone like that a year. Because the problem with him is he was very young when he came to the squad, and he was very inexperienced, which is worse than just being young. You can be young and just go to the right team and get the right experience early on. So I think actually if Threat does his magic, I do think he could do a great job molding the players, figuring out the roles, all that sort of thing. Give him maybe, I'm going to say 6 months. That's when they should do something. I don't think they'll do anything immediate. That's unreasonable. In 6 months, I think there's actually a rare example of a squad where I don't think after 3 months you'll know how good they are. I think in 6 months, maybe that's when they have like the nice upset potential and people are fragging well and they can show you some firepower on the server.
It all depends, though, doesn't it? Because again, it's much like the Navi situation. Threat is from an entirely different era. Like a lot of this is going to depend on how much these players are actually going to buy into the changes he wants to make, and whatever kind of smokes or executes. Or Threat is also the super nerd kind of Counter-Strike player. Yeah. He's going to look at all the different angles and the timings. Younger players oftentimes don't enjoy doing that as much, and the style that they've kind of come up in the FPLs, in the pug systems, in the rank S's, it doesn't lend itself to that kind of strategy. So I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic as well to keep track of just consistently going to them and saying, what's Threat providing? What is he doing for you? Is he, who's going to meet who? Like, are the young players going to meet Threat's theory, or is Threat's theory going to have to come down and change its style for the younger meta? So I think that's just another thing that NIP is going to have to figure out. So I actually don't think 6 months is unreasonable at all. I think that's plenty of time for all those things to develop and kind of, see what path they're going to take.
Do we know who's going to IGL for this NIP team? Is it Lekro now again?
I mean, that's what people assumed just because he did it at one point in time in the past, if you remember when Dennis gave it up. But I actually have no idea for that one. That's one I'm certainly interested to know, because that's an obvious flaw they do have in the team, I will say. That's an exact... In fact, I mean, to be fair, we've made this point in the Swedish scene a lot. That's probably the reason why Golden got his second chance, because the thing that Sweden most obviously lacked was just like a veteran IGL, because unfortunately... all the ones that were great, pretty much out the door, washed up on other teams doing whatever. So
bring back Pronax.
I mean, the funny thing is, he still hangs around a bit, so he still makes out like he could come back.
He's coaching Godsent, or he's like the GM, or what is he doing now? They brought Godsent back for like the third time. That org has died and been revived. Like, it's unbelievable.
I have a team I want to ask you about, actually, and let's see your thoughts on this, Hawka. Right? One of the teams that I really enjoy, I'm actually a fan of them. I have to just say, I enjoy watching them play, but I'm not hyped about at all in the top 10 is 100 Thieves, right? And the reason why is pretty simple. I actually do think they're fairly sort of like plateaued. Like, they kind of get everything out of all the players, and they're quite well-rounded, and they have a good map pool, and I actually think they have one of the best coaches in the game. From talking to Casada, I actually am a very big believer in him. I think he's done a great job with them. I think JKS has, developed a lot of the potential that he had years ago. The problem I have with them as a team, like I say, is like, I can't get too hyped, because it's like, if they play Astralis, they should lose to Astralis. If they play... I mean, I'll say like Team Liquid, if they play, they probably should lose to Team Liquid. If they play a team below them, if they play G2 or Fit, they probably should beat those teams. Like, what are your thoughts on this team?
Yeah, I think pretty similar. Like, they're getting a good amount out of all of their pieces. It's just like, where does that next step come from? Which we very rarely see happen from teams. Like, Mouse Sports are one of the teams that somehow managed to to manage to win tournaments, but like, I don't see them having that Carrigan type of figure in their team. The player that I always looked at on this squad as either being kind of the one that could make or break them was probably Gratisfaction, just because I feel like some tournaments he plays really well, and then you have like a lot more firepower, and then you could start to compete at the top. I don't think he hits that level consistently, though. So again, it probably comes down to consistency from him, but it definitely, again, like you said, decent team. They're probably like, I guess, kind of the gatekeepers to sort of the top level right now.
That's a good angle, yeah.
Yeah, like they probably won't beat the teams above them. Yeah, probably will beat the teams below them, which isn't like a bad thing, I think, considering the players they have.
They're better than Vitality, who's one spot above them at 6. I agree. I think 100 Thieves has that weird problem where they're good and they're fun, and this is the most success they've ever had, but their peaks aren't very high. Their peak is never going to beat, the Evil Geniuses peak, the Fnatic peak, the Liquid Mouse Sports peak, but they do feel like they're probably more consistent than Evil Geniuses. Like, they're not winning a tournament and then going out in groups for 2 events and then, doing top 4 and then going out and, they seem just very consistent and coasting, but I agree. I don't see what puts them over the edge unless Azza has some kind of insane tournament while he's also in-game leading. I think Gratisfaction is pretty good, but I think as an AWPer, he makes some positional mistakes that hold them back. I agree with you with that one, Hawka. I think that's one area where I think if someone individually pulled Grat aside and was like, these fundamental mistakes, these movement and positioning mistakes as an opera are very damaging. But even with that, I can't see them jumping up to be able to start winning events out of nowhere. So I think they're just kind of in a very cool limbo. And I guess it all depends on how the org wants to take it from there. Are they content with that position, staying pretty consistent within the top 10, or do they want to try and make a play to be one of the best in the world?
I think we've got a team we could talk about, though. I'm just looking at the squads now and thinking who we can talk about next. I think a team we could talk about that, here's the thing, to me, if we say anything good about them, it's controversial because everyone's just on the hate train. It's ENCE, right? A team that when they were at their peak, I actually thought they were quite similar to what we just described with 100 Thieves. Like, they're one of the few teams I think did benefit a little bit when the field was weaker. That's why they got to look like they were a world-class team, but like, they weren't going to win many tournaments if we're being realistic. If you look at them now, obviously now, after everyone was a super fan of them in the first half of last year, the hate train against them now is nuts. Like, people almost like want them to be bad. Like, I think it's sad that they're bad, personally. I still think some of the players are good. So do you have any thoughts on this, Hawka? Does it turn around? Do you think there's some potential in ENCE?
I watched them in the Katowice qualifier against Mad Lions, like I think it was last week, and I don't know if it was just because they've had a long time off, but they looked bad. Just like fundamentals were just off. Like their players were off. Like the second round of the series, they lost against 5 Glocks against Mad Lions, a team that don't have massive firepower. I don't know. There was something that seemed very, very off with this team. Alu is still looking good. He was having a lot of rounds where he'd get picks. He played pretty aggressive, but Sergey was much quieter. Yeah, I just don't see, I guess, where the sort of in-game leader and the sort of team play comes back into this squad. That just seems to be the biggest problem. I mean, I don't think they're sitting and trying to have fun, as the meme seems to go. But,
yeah, that just went too far, obviously.
But yeah, it just doesn't... I just don't see a way back right now with this 5 unless they like something drastically switches round. Unless that was just a massive underperformance where their individuals were off, which obviously was the case. But I just like the team play was just not there. It was really weird to watch. But maybe I'm just overlooking into that one game too much. I don't know, but it was not great.
What do you think?
I certainly don't wish anything bad on ENCE, and I don't necessarily think they're terrible or anything. I don't really have anything to say about them on a team scale. My big question with this team is, where's Sunny? Like, he was supposed to be like the star that was promised when he came back, like the return. Everyone is waiting for so long to see which team Sunny chose to join, and he's still not playing well. He's still not playing where we saw him, before he took the hiatus, before all that went down, before he just sat waiting for the Finnish team to open up a spot for him. So the tough part is, I think there was a couple things, and Duncan, you alluded to it. I think obviously peaking and getting a second place at the major and gaining such a rabid fan base behind them was probably them overachieving in that major. And I think they were already going to have a comeback down to earth. And then that coinciding a few months later of them choosing, to drop their in-game leader for Sunny was like the next nail in the coffin, where it seems worse than it was. They were going to come down a little bit. They're not some like world-breaking or meta-breaking team. I just sit here and I just wonder what's happening. If they are going to get back, Sunny has to step up and be a star in some kind of way. There's no other option you can make. You can't go back and bring Alexi into the team, and he wouldn't even probably do it now that he's on OG. I will say the one thing that they better be crossing their fingers and praying for is that OG isn't good. They better hope and pray that OG just gets absolutely stopped, because if OG comes out and has a good year and overtakes him in the ranking, this is all going to come flooding back. So they better just be praying, going to voodoo witches, like doing everything you can, rabbit's feet, cursing this team in every way possible to hold them off.
Well, especially because, as Hawker alluded to, it's not like they retained any of what people enjoyed about the tactics events before. So if you add the two together combined, whether it's true or not, you're never going to be able to defeat the narrative that Alexi B did it all tactically. Like that will just be the story, because it'll just look so obvious. So I will say, like, the one thing that I hold out for hope for in this team is Sonny did have a long time off being a pro player. And he didn't actually have, like, people have to remember, he only came back after the major, Remember, the major was at some point in September it ended. So he actually didn't have that many months to play. And his months were the months where it's like you're almost always at a tournament. So he basically was just thrown right back into the fire and had to instantly try and perform. And he obviously did not. Like, I will say, at the very end of the year when he was at that, like, fairly, like, lower tier Malta tournament, the Champions Cup that was going on where we were doing Epicenter. When I went back and watched a few of their games, he was pretty good there, but that was also lesser talent. So I haven't like destroyed hope that he could become a top player again. It's just he better do it quick. Like you don't get to have 8 months to do that. Like you were brought in to do that, so you obviously have to do it. But I personally think whether he gets good or not, I'm with you. Like there's not really any other players in this team are going to go crazy and get way better than they were. So to me, I think they should be looking for a different player in the Finnish scene. Like look for someone else you could bring on board. There's got to be talent. I don't believe that there isn't talent in the Finnish scene. Like there's always been some talents. It's whether or not they have the right mentality, whether they can bring them in. Because whenever I used to ask them a couple of years ago, people like Alu and other players, like there must be someone, they would just say like, well, funny enough, it was actually sometimes they were talking about teams that had like Alexi B. They would say, yeah, there are players that are good or like they know the game, but they don't have a professional mentality at all. Like, you know, they just don't want to like practice properly, or they just like, I mean, I don't want to go too far in this because people will take this as like gospel, but some of them literally would just be drinking beers while they were playing and stuff. So like the angle was like they're not a professional mentality. So maybe that's something that holds them back, but I would hope that ENCE rising up makes them believe, like whoever the next guy is, you know.
Here's the big problem with ENCE is, and Duncan, you'll know this because we get to speak to those guys, and obviously know some people behind the scenes with the organization pretty well. You know, the kind of party line that when that change was made, and this, I don't think this is any secret publicly, and if it is, it's not anymore. Was that he didn't do it. You alluded to like he didn't do as much as people thought. Like he wasn't this all like knowing in-game leader who molded this team the way that we were painting it out to be. Well, they're missing something that he provided in a big way. This drop-off is too much. And if that's the angle you're going to take when you cut him, that means you didn't have a great understanding of all the things that he was providing to this team that led to its success. And if you don't know what that was, how do you go about replacing it? Like, how do you even know where to look in the next player? Like, you don't even know what you're supposed to have. You don't even know what was provided, what kind of, emotional support, tactical support, motivational, whatever it might have been. Something that he provided, you're missing now, and you need to find it. You need to get it back, but you don't know what it is. So we'll see how 2020 goes. I just have to wonder. I would wonder if they have a time limit. Like, what would be your time limit, Duncan, where you say this project is now done, or Hawka? Like, how much longer do you give the ENCE team?
I mean, I have to be honest. Like, true, I said I'll still give maybe Sonny a couple more months to see if he can like develop as a star player again. But as far as like the current 5-man lineup does, I've already seen enough. Like, I would maybe be quicker than other people. I'd pull like, it's not like the whole point is I wouldn't change most of the team. I would try and maybe change one player. Like I've said it before, but the player I think is surplus requirements is Ariel. Like I just don't think he's very good in this team. And that sounds rough because if you haven't watched it much, you just remember that brilliant blast final and you think, oh, it was great, wasn't it? It's like, yeah, but if you'd done any of that shit, we wouldn't be talking about a lack of firepower. Like Sergey's a banger. Alu can sometimes be good. Sonny's trying to get back. At that point in time, you'd have a lot of skill potentially. So like like I say, unfortunately, I don't know the scene enough to know who the name to replace him with. I don't know any of the other Finnish players basically. But I feel like I would gamble. Like I think now is the time to gamble. I know they won't do that because if you know the way that teams work, like they will already be using some of the things I said earlier, but as an excuse, like, well, we were on the road a lot, we never got to properly be at home, and now that we've had a break, this is what, we're starting now. Like, they'll be doing that sort of thing. So they probably, I would imagine, no matter the results, take at least 3 more months before they do a roster move. But I would kind of just get ahead of it and try and do the move now, personally.
Especially with the major coming up.
Oh, that's the other thing. If they go to the major with this lineup, what the fuck are they going to do? Like, nothing. Like, at the moment, it's really disturbing, that thought. What do you think, Hawka?
Yeah, I guess you do ride it out to the major. I also think that, like, I'm trying to think, even when I'm casting, like, online tournaments that aren't great, like, I never really see Finnish teams too often. So I don't know how many teams there are even out there, honestly, in the sort of lower scene of Finland. So it's kind of, I guess, hard on that front to find a move for them that's really going to work.
Havu would be the other one.
Yeah, I guess I see Havu sometimes. I have like no clue even like who the good players are on that team though. So yeah, it's something they'd have to look into. I guess that the question there is also at what point does the org come in and say we just need to do something at this point compared to the players, because that's always the discussion you can have. I'm sure the players will find excuses until until the sun goes down or whatever.
That was actually basically, again, not to like harp on it, I'm just bringing it back to actually give context to it. That was basically what I think Ariel actually meant by that statement where he said, like, we're going to have fun now or whatever. That's the problem, in fact, is one of the things that will make teams keep rosters that aren't that good the longest is exactly if actually there's no problems emotionally, like everyone gets along or like the personalities match up. The problem with that is then it makes you think, well, that angle can't be the problem. So it must just be something we've got to fix in the game. But it's like, yeah, but in the game, it's not working. So, like, actually, that doesn't work. Like, what? It's like I always say that, in my opinion, that's the cart before the horse. What you want is a team that works well in the game, and then if you're lucky, let's hope some of the players get along and you've got a good vibe. Like, that's the way you want to go. You can't go the other way. You can't just put together, like, Nice Guys Inc. and then just, right, do any of these guys actually know how to play Counter-Strike? Fuck, no. Like, that way doesn't work. You know, it is, at the end of the day, I often say it as a glib statement, but like the game is about shooting people in the head faster than the other guy. Listen, there's a lot around that. And what's great about tactics is how you set that guy up or how you knock a guy out of a position who can do that if he's in that spot. But at the end of the day, you do have to be able to do that basic thing. And if you don't have players who can do it enough, you're just not going to be a good Counter-Strike team.
I'm trying to think. What team do I want to talk about?
I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Here's the thing, Moses. You're a big boy. You can handle it. I might be dropping you in it right now. I might actually be setting you up for the fall, not even intentionally, unlike all those other times. But do you know anything about the new Cloud9 team, the ATK team? Did you watch them aside from EPL?
I've watched them a little bit. I've caught some of their qualifier games. I watched them a little bit this morning. I don't know.
Do you have any
much
comments to give?
No, not to be honest with you. I don't know them well enough, and I haven't seen enough games to really form a great opinion on them.
Did you think it was a good pickup?
Yeah, I do. I think it was a very good pickup for the organization itself. Just based off the results they had, you know, that run they had, they took some scalps, they played some close games, and I think if you're Cloud9, like, and you're going to stay in North America, that had to have been the most promising roster. I think it's really cool as well. They have 3 South African people on the team?
Two. They have.
I think the coach isn't the coach.
Oh yes, the coach
yeah.
is. Sure.
Yeah, motherfuckers. Look who's done his research. Yeah, so I mean, I can't think of a better team in North America for them to have necessarily gone for without building a completely new roster. I think this was a very cool pickup. The one problem that I have, not problem, but the one worry I have with a team like this is North American teams have a trend over the years of, you know, we saw it so many times, the teams who qualified from like Mountain Dew or ESEA Premier and got into Pro League, you know, over the various seasons that we've had. So rarely do they stick together when that step up in competition comes. Almost as if, like, maybe not at an individual level, but on a team level, they're not prepared to go through all the struggles it takes to become a better team. And that's what scares me the most. Now, the nice thing is the salaries, the contracts kind of make you at this day and age like forced to kind of stick it out if there's issues. But, you know, these are players who are getting a big jump up into Cloud9, a lot more eyeballs, a lot more of a fan base, a lot more content. They're getting thrown into it. So I hope they just stick together and kind of have, you know, at least give themselves some time to work through the problems and see what they actually have before making any change. But I like this pickup from Cloud9. I really do. I can't think of anyone that I would have rather seen them pick up. I don't think there's a whole lot of promising teams. It's weird. I think at this point in time, you could probably say this is the best that the North American region has ever been with the teams that we have at the top. But I don't think there's a whole lot of teams that I've seen outside of this new Cloud9 roster that is necessarily promising and like up and coming in any way. So that's kind of a scary thing for the region.
Yeah, I think the exciting thing, like you said, like the thing that's exciting is that you kind of pick up a team that has been kind of doing well. And like you were saying, I don't think all these players will probably at the end of it be cut out for a top tier team, but just stick with this roster and then you can figure out which players are going to be, you know, able to make the step up. From what I've seen from this team, Sonic looks good. I know Floppy was playing MDL for like 9 or 10 seasons in a row or something ridiculous. I think he's a player that, like, it's going to take him probably a bit longer to transition to playing at the big lands, it seems. And those are kind of the 2 standout players, I guess. But yeah, I think the main takeaway is just, you know, stick it out, see how this team does for a few months, and then there's got to be players out there that you're going to be able to pick up later on if you need more firepower, if that's something that you kind of understand. So it's important, I think, for Cloud9, considering what's been happening with their roster, just get a consistent 5, stick with it for a bit, and then go from there, and then try and rebuild and have more of a long-term plan. And I think this is a decent start to that. Like, there's some pieces here that I think long-term you could see being in Cloud9, like a year or two down the line in a really competitive squad. So there's definitely upside here.
Yeah, my take on this is it's a bit like yours, is a bit tweaked though, because on the one hand, I definitely agree with the angle that what you really need to do is they've barely played at tier 1. So you have to actually really give people the test. You have to basically give them like the baptism of fire. Like, yeah, they had one big LAN already. They played obviously the offline phase of that. And now they have to go to a bunch of LANs. And I don't expect them to actually have even similar results to that. I think they won't be a very good team. But all I want to see is which players make it through the other side. Because so far, when I looked into them and did my research to do my video, like Sonic actually looks good. He actually looks like, I won't say like potential, I don't think he's going to get much, but he actually looks like a good player now. Like, he actually is pretty legit. I can see he must have been the best player in that Bravado team or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Then, like you say, Floppy is someone where he certainly seems to have the potential. So that's why that's why for this lineup, I want to see them tested, because I want to see if he can actually like develop as a star player type player. If he can't, you actually probably want to get rid of someone like that. If they have like this all the skills and they can do it when it's like a small LAN or if it's online, but they don't do it on LAN, like they're the nightmare players to have in your lineup. They're the ones that are always going to be like the problem child in that sense.
Sure are.
So if that player doesn't make it, you want to just get a proven player in place of him. In terms of the others, I think a bunch of the others won't make it. Like, here's the one thing I'll say. The JT player is the classic low fragger, but seems to actually be a pretty decent IGL. Like, they have executes in that team. Like, they're not actually scrubs for anyone who doesn't know. They don't play like scrimmy style NACS. They have executes. Like, they know their roles that they're playing in. So I don't mind him being in the team. So for me, first of all, the reason I found it underwhelming is because it's Cloud9. Like, when I see your rival orgs, 100 Thieves, e.g. buying better squads, I can't help but feel like, what the fuck, and you ended up with this team? Like, that always has to be whack, sorry. But what I will say is this. If you think of some of the other talent, I mean, just look at the other NA orgs that are in dire straits who bought players. The ones who made teams, no one knows if those teams will be good, but I will say some of the players are good. So if you could take some of those players, an Automatic or a Bentet or something, and drop them into a team like this, once you know which piece to replace, now you could actually have a team that could do something. Because that's the thing. What they've got that the other squads don't have is they're a real team. I don't personally think a bunch of the players are good enough for tier 1, but being a real team's pretty legit in NA, actually. There's not a lot of teams come up like that. Not a lot of people can even build a squad like that.
You know what I'm doing if I'm one of these new orgs coming in to Counter-Strike. We know there's a lot of them hunting around and sniffing around. And I've said that I think we've said this a couple times on the show. I go get Steel. I go get Josh. Yeah. And I'm just like, listen, I'm building a new team. I'm starting at 0. I'm starting at scratch. Help me build this team up. Let's get a deal in place. We want you to be the figurehead. And no, we know you can't compete at majors. You can't be a part of the Valve events. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We'll probably have to do this, or this.
He could still probably like play test the players, though, couldn't he? And bring them into
or why don't
competitive environment.
Why not like just pay them to like consult? Be like, hey, we're playing this week at this league and we're at this event. We want you to come in and spend time with the team and watch the matches and give us an opinion. But just as someone who's got so much experience, who's you can get for relatively cheap because he's not available for the majors. Like, you can just go and say, help me get started down this path of CSGO. And that's a wealth of resource that I don't think has been tapped at all. It could be because I'm sure he's had some offers that he's probably turned down, but I don't know. I've always just sat there and been like, if you're a new org, why not? Just take the risk and say, we have at least a year before we're even going to think about, getting top 16 in the world, top 24 in the world, unless we're going to drop huge amounts of money on a roster. Have this guy come in and help you build up the team, build up the squad.
I mean, he's on like Chaos now, a team where like
Smoothie
is basically the only player I know, and even like they were getting some results online. So yeah, I honestly as well, I feel like you look at how many tournaments there are available. Like, sure, the majors are going to be a miss, but there's only 2 majors in a year now. Like, is that a big enough of a sacrifice, especially considering how many orgs are just trying to get in and trying to find, basically any team they can? Like, I don't know what the hell Envy are doing. I think they have Nifty and they're going to announce, their players or whatever. Yeah, you got to feel like Steel, just in terms of his ability to make something or make the best out of the players he has got to be like a really hot prospect for sure. Not prospect, but you know what I mean, like a hot commodity. That's what I meant to say.
I mean, it's a prospect. It's just not in the sense of like he isn't a prospect as a player. You just need the prospect of him doing that is cool. Yeah, it's more as like the I don't fucking know the English term, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Yeah. No, it's weird. It's weird though thinking about the NA region. Just to go back to that, there's what outside of EG and Liquid who are in the top 5. You go down, and I mean, I'm not counting
everyone
the teams
else is around the same level, but they're just way below. Everyone else, as far as I'm concerned, is tier 2.
There's Cloud9, obviously, but then there's Cloud9 at 17, and then there's Riot Squad is like the next best.
Oh, in terms of the ratings, yeah.
And he just got cut.
Yeah, he did.
But like, for example, obviously, like the players they have in Genji, they have some potential there in terms of the skill. I just don't know if they can be a good team, you know.
Yeah, there's some cool things about Genji. I think the big one is this Bentet. I think without Bentet, I would have been sitting here just like, I don't know what this team. And I already expressed I have real big concerns about this team, considering the way some of these players, not all of them, but some of these players just quit and kind of gave up at the end in Cloud9.
Sure.
Like what a wild thing to do while you're under contract, and that kind of, you know, I think it kind of tilts the more soapbox aspect of my personality, where I'm just like, how are you not busting your ass and working hard at all this? So I don't know. They have too good of pieces to be bad, but if that's an indication of the mentality you're bringing into this next year of Counter-Strike, that's not a good look.
And then the other team that obviously has potential is the complexity lineup. Like, say what you like about, like, I don't know how high they can go. I'm not like a guy making some crazy prediction they're going to go high, but like that clearly has talent in that team. So it's more if you can just get it to work and make like a style that's coherent, because some of those players, they actually, for the level they're at, they've got some pretty fucking good players, I have to say.
Bro, can you just go to their HLTV page and just look at the pictures of all these kids with their arms crossed, you know, like the bicep, the esports bicep picture when you're crossing your arms. They've got Rush, who's now jacked. They've got Config, who's always been a little bit of a bigger guy. They got Blame F, who's fucking jacked. And then they've got like 16-year-old Oboe with his little noodle arms. And like, how cruel. Why are those guys with their arms crossed? That should never be allowed.
Like, Oboe doesn't even look like he's the same species as some of the rest of the guys.
I know.
Like, I think it's because they've actually like made the size wrong. Like, there's no way he can actually be that size, but it makes him look like he's like some sort of like a fucking elf. And then like, Blame F's, I don't even know what, he's just massive, isn't he? He's massive. Yeah, you're right. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Why have they put them next to him in that?
And then Poison's like, look, I'm not muscly, but I'm not Oboe. that's like his whole vibe, isn't it?
Poison literally just follows Oboe around to be like, guys, at least I'm bigger than this guy.
All I have to do is not be the scrawniest one of the team.
Exactly.
Because I actually think the firepower of this team is fucking legit.
Yeah, I think
They have
so.
some legit players.
Blame F also seems to be the kind of guy who's going to just works really, really hard to try and make this team work, which is always a nice aspect to have. And then for me, like the X factor is if you can get Config back to a really good level, now you're cooking with gas. Because Poison to me has always looked really solid as an AWPer. He's pretty aggressive sometimes, but I know that he like has the confidence in himself to make stuff work. And then also like Rush is starting to look better in the games that I saw from this squad already. So yeah, there's a lot of upside here again. The big one to me, like I said, Config could definitely be the guy that makes or breaks this 5-man lineup for me.
Don't say my boy Rush. I think it's mental how many people I've seen just give up on Rush over the past. I mean, I know he didn't have
Rush. Yeah, there you go. He was probably the worst defender, I believe.
I still think he is a fucking solid player, and I think he's going to get back. I think he's going to surprise people this year. I'm worried about the Config thing, about him getting back to his level as one of the best players in the world. I think that mentality stuff is a real tricky beast to get over, and I don't know if he's going to be able to do it and become one of the top players in the world again. But I too think this team is pretty promising in terms of what I think the potential peak is there to get you excited. And I think the other reason I really like this play from Jason Lake and Complexity, Duncan, you remember this. part of my appreciation for the Juggernaut tweet is that's the exact same thing he did in 2003, 2, whatever year it was. Remember when he would come out and make those outrageous statements in like 1.6?
Yeah.
One of the first people to come in and offer. When I saw him make that Juggernaut tweet, I'm just like, am I going back in time? Like, is this asshole come from the past to like start all over again? Because this is exactly how he started Complexity, 20 years or 15 years ago. It was this exact kind of brash prediction, and it got on a lot of people's nerves. A lot of people hated it back then as well. I think this is great. I think he's put himself in a good starting position to have something to work with here. Maybe it's not this lineup, but 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road when he starts to see what he has to work with, I can see him putting together another.
No, but that's the key thing, as you said there. The reason people memed on him is because, like, first of all, his first announcement was Blame F, which is like, yeah, he's a good player, but like, if that's the first big piece you're announcing, it's not the same as if you'd somehow gotten like, I mean, Alexi B even at the time was a bigger name, like people wanted him in a team, or Valde or someone, like they would have been big names to get. But that's the point to me, is what people have missed is that wasn't a one-time statement. That he made what he should have said there, by the way. This is the line he didn't add to that speech, which would have actually really set what I think he was trying to do. Is at the end when he said, I'll pay you buyout, I'll pay you the biggest salary. What he should have said at the end is, this is an open offer. That's the point I think that because that's what I believe is his philosophy. So I think you're right. This is just a starting piece. And at the moment, if you look at it, if you want to start out, and as you say, you want to see which of these players are talent. Right, with the exception of Roche, which, I mean, you're not writing him off, but I am writing him off. Like, I haven't seen anything for ages. Everyone else on the team has like a reason they could get better or be a better player. And if they could, they're already half decent players. So, okay, let's, this is one of the reasons I personally don't think the whole like C980K team will make it. It's very rare that you bring like 5 players along and then they all just make it and get better. So the point is, though, when you've got as many prospects as they have now in call, let's say pick 2 of the 4, whoever they are. Maybe it isn't even config. Maybe it's Obo and Poison, or maybe it's, I mean, Blame F's already pretty good, but maybe it develops even more as an IGL, and then it's Blame F and who's the other player I'm not remembering at the moment?
Config
Rush, Poison,
Obo.
Oh no, I've gone through them all already. Yeah. So let's say it's Obo and Blame F get really good. Okay, then that's the basis, and now you replace one of the others. Maybe it's Config didn't make it, maybe it's Poison didn't make it, whichever one. And whichever one didn't make it, if you really still believe in that philosophy, well, first of all, if they already like have a couple of players who look better, now more players who are good might join. And especially if they're leaving a bad team. So now you could potentially get an even better player. And now suddenly you're not that many pieces from being a legit team.
Well, that's the trick. It's been hard for Complexity to attract the top
They could never
talent.
get their foot in the door, basically.
Yeah, you have to have something for a star player to say, yeah, I'll come play with you. Like if you have no team or a team that's not competitive in North America, no one's going to want, they're just going to laugh at the offer no matter how much money it is. But I think the real interesting, like, obviously the star players, someone like Config getting back to his level is important. Obo developing is important. Poison developing is important. But I think the most important player on this team right now is Blame F. Because it's not like he's some kind of established in-game leader. This is a lot of faith put into like him being able to pick up the reins, be a leader of the team, not only strategically and calling, but emotionally. And that his emergence as an in-game leader is critical, because if this is just going to be a starting piece, if you change the in-game leader, like you turn over into a starting piece again. Like you haven't established any kind of core players on this team. So if you replace Blame F, you got to start at ground zero again. So if you're Complexity, you're really buying into Blame F as kind of a piece that you want to be on this team for at least the next 2 years. So that's the most important player in my mind to say he's got to take the biggest step up this year, because he is going to be the leader of the squad and the leader of whatever they want to bring in the future, unless something crazy bad happens, like if he just can't cut it. But that would...
Yeah. I'm also interested to see, I know when Blame F came up on like Epsilon, I'm pretty sure he was leading there, and he would basically call the game around himself because he was obviously the best player on the team.
Sure.
So that there's maybe that adaptation period where I don't know if on this roster he should be calling the game around himself. I mean, he can still obviously make plays, but there's, like we were saying, a lot of talent here. So figuring that out is something else. But again, like he comes across as the kind of guy who's going to put in a lot of time and is just fairly intelligent and should be able to figure this stuff out. So like I don't mind that pickup for sure. Like you were saying, though, definitely important to see like how he develops as an in-game leader.
That's the only thing I don't like about complexity is that angle. Like, I don't know what the blame of IGL angle will be like. As a fragger, he certainly seems good. And so I have two questions there. Like, one, what happens if he's not the IGL? Like, that's actually an angle I'd love to see. Like, would he still be a really good player? Would he not be as good? Because if he's not as good, that kind of actually saps some of the appeal. Because this is actually the sort of team where I wish it was Daps that had joined this team. Give Daps talent like this. First of all, you'll find out very quickly which ones are good. And secondly, you might already be able to make them functional. That's the kind of IGL who knows how to make a team. So I do feel like that's the piece they're probably missing, is the IGL.
Who do you take out of complexity in Genji G right now, out of interest?
Wait,
he means like which team's better, I think. Who's going to be better in the future? I personally think... Ooh, that's a tough one, actually.
That is a spicy question.
The problem is I think the talent is better on complexity, but there's a
I know you hate Kusta, Thorin.
No, as much as I do, it's hard to predict Kusta to win games. That's true. But,
it is.
But I will say, I am someone who has... I think I have a lot more than other people, like, respect for Daps's game, basically. Like I've said before, I think Daps is like the North American MSL. Like, they're both not that good individually, so that automatically will get you, like, mocked and derided. But then, unfortunately, when they get their teams good, it's like they don't get them quite good enough that they get the full respect that you want, because they don't win the championships usually. So the problem they have is they're always, like, one step away from, like, truly people going, like, yes, you are one of the best leaders, well done. And then they either get their players taken or they get kicked out of the team. So... I think the problem is, at this level, I think Daps, again, to give the Hunden example, he should run circles around the IGLs he's playing at this level. Like, I think he's definitely good, and he's definitely good enough. He's got good pieces around him. The problem is I feel like that's almost like a wash, that comparison, because I feel like the talent of complexity should put them at a similar level to where Genji is, but then I feel like Genji has some of the pieces. I also personally think that they're a team that definitely roster moves. That's what's weird about the recent generation of NA moves, actually, is none of them are terrible. Like, none of them got like a team where it's all five is just like, what's the point of these five, or they'll never work together. But all of them look like they're two pieces away from being good. And so the reason, like, this is where you can't actually use this logic as an org. Like, if I wanted to make a good team in NA to be the third best team, obviously I'd take pieces from all these squads. I'd maybe take Dabs, and I'd take this guy, maybe take, I don't know, fucking Poison, then I'd take Benter, and then maybe I'd take the Sonic guy, and I'd make this team. But the point is, like, well, unsurprisingly, those three teams don't want to get together, give all the star players and best players to one team, and then the others just go, well, I'll just have a shit team then. So I totally get how the business means they could end up with these squads. These are actually squads where I'll tie it in, like, this is why I'm going to sound like a shill, but I don't give a fuck. This is an example of where, as far as I know, I don't think it's been reported even in rumours that Complexity would be in the B-Site League. I think that it was implied they would be an EPL team. Obviously, all the thus far reports have implied it, like Genji and Cloud9 will be. And the fact that Dan Fiden literally is involved with B-Site probably gives that one away. I hope everyone's figured that one out. So if we just look at the fact that of the three teams, Cloud9 and Genji may well be in the B-Site League, the upside there is if you want to see them make one or two upgrade moves, and you think that, like I do, that might make them the good teams, well, as I've mentioned recently, there are a lot of reasons as to how that league is structured, where you have a choice to either just basically lose money and pay a lot more money, or you're basically forced to get better players and make the upgrade. So unlike the scenarios we were talking about before with, like, does Vitality have quite enough talent? Will fucking ENCE just keep sitting on this lineup and not do anything? I don't think these teams actually have that choice. So I think actually in some ways, I think that will be good for the NA scene, because, like, they potentially will bring in more import talent. They will potentially pay more for them, and they'll potentially be willing to pull the trigger a bit earlier, because what you're thinking to yourself is, every month I don't have a top 20 HLTV ranking, I pay $100,000. So all of a sudden, when I'm negotiating with that guy for his buyout, what normally happens is, the reason the report of the player joining the team comes out 3 months before the player signs is that's both sides trying to get as much as they can from the buyout. Well, if I have to wait 3 months and that's 300k extra, I might as well just pay now rather than haggle the guy down 300k. I still pay the same in the end anyway. So it sounds like a roundabout way to say it, but it actually means I believe that the NA scene, if the league can do what it says it will, obviously maybe some of these things don't end up happening, I think that will actually be the shot in the arm for the NA scene, because it's a lot of NA orgs that have been rumoured to join at the moment. Notice how I didn't have to even say they were good, Moses, and I still gave an angle as to why it could be interesting. That's called talent, son. That's talent.
It's called dodging the fucking question.
I answered the question. In about a year from now, people like the fucking Score Esports, when they make their documentary, how did Jason Lake make his juggernaut? Just take half of the shit I'm saying now. I'll even give you permission. I won't even copyright strike you. Take my voice over there, put like all fucking Hans Zimmer music like behind it as I'm talking. Then you show like the players' faces like dissolving away as the new player comes in. They bring in, I don't know, someone like fucking Esperanto comes in instead of some guy. I don't know. Yeah,
what the fuck?
I know I'm going crazy on this one. Instead of like Motum or whatever, Esperanto's in, and then some other fucking player, I don't know, maybe some Russian guy just gets involved or whatever. And then next thing you know, he's like, Juggernaut, bitch. And then the next thing you know, Complexity, I'm not going to be stupid and say wins the major. Like, you don't even need that sound clip. It'll never happen. But, you know, they're a top 10 team. There you go. There you go.
Then you get that. Then you get that little image of Duncan looking confused, and you play the Larry David music right over it, the Curb Your Enthusiasm tune, and then you fade to black.
I like the catchphrase "Juggernaut bitch" as well. I feel like that should be Complexity.
That was one of the OG memes. I'm the Juggernaut bitch. Yeah, that was so good. That he should dude. When he was putting all those little Easter eggs in the pictures that he was tweeting, that was fucking sick. He put like little Juggernaut heads in the Miller Lite Lounge. To answer your question, I think Genji is going to be better in the short term, and I think Complexity should be overtake them. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people, Duncan. I also respect Daps, but I think you put his. I think that comparison to MSL. I think MSL's much better. I think Daps still has some struggles that I don't think he can get over. I think bigger than anything is. This is going to go back to what I used to say about Cloud9 before Stewie really started becoming the leader on that team is where's the personality in this team? Like Kusta, Automatic, Daps, all three very quiet.
It's a very quiet team.
It's got to be some. Like that's not going to be a high energy team.
Oh, and by the way, listen, Ben Tet, even though he absolutely is fluent in English, he's not going to be going wild. Obviously, he's not that sort of a guy. So actually, I agree with you that if you want to go like basically there's another angle to team building that it makes it so difficult to make squads. What you're talking about there is personality balance. So forget even if they're all good players. Yeah, do their personalities fit? You're not wrong there. There is no alpha male type character there.
And that's the real problem I have, I think, with every time. I've always struggled to kind of put into words, some of the issues I have with Daps as an in-game leader. And I think the problem is there's just like no leader of men on these teams.
No, there isn't, of course.
And this is just another situation. And if you don't have that like emotional leader, I always struggle to say like, where's your identity? Like as a team, like where does it come from? And you can't just be a team that comes in and plays like tactical Counter-Strike as much as you can't quantify it. That kind of identity and that kind of emotion that's brought in by certain players has an impact on how you do as a team. And without that, I just look at this team and I'm like, this is going to be like a quiet team doesn't seem like they're going to be very energetic or like, focused on the task at hand. They're going to come in, they're going to sit down, they're going to plug in their gear and they're going to play the game. And whatever happens, happens. I don't get that feeling that this is going to be a team that's, I don't know, like, not motivated, but like I just struggle to find that this is a team that is going to have like direction, that is going to have a goal set that they're working at attaining. That's where I think they're really going to have a stumbling block.
I'm just like picturing the interviews on this team right now, and like almost all of these players, I feel like if you ask them the question of like, you think you're going to win today? They'd be like, we'll see. Like they don't have that kind of guy, although some might bring some of that, but yeah, they don't quite have the fire on the team, right? To really be the best, it feels like, which is kind of harsh to say, but that's just how it kind of comes across with their personalities.
No, that's where, like, for example, they could have done with a config. Someone who has that site. See, that is exactly the type of personality that player has.
I think Som does have some of that, though.
The problem with him is, like, he actually has a problem that's a classic NA problem, so we maybe address this actually, which is when you're an up-and-coming player in NA, and especially if you make your name off having, like, aim or, like, making a bunch of plays in FPL or being scrimmy and making your way through MDL, the problem is you basically... like, you're cocky in a way that could end up being good. Like, if you channel that could be great. You could be a star player one day. You could be the leader of your team, and like emotionally in that sense. The problem is this. As soon as you go to a team like he did, and you play a couple of proper lands at the proper tier 1 level, and you don't do well, it's hard to actually... There's a very rare type of person who still can, like, believe in themselves after that. Like, if anything, you just dial it back and go, maybe I just don't talk shit for a while. Maybe I just chill for a while, wait till my game gets there. And then I think that's what's happened to him. I think you'll see that in the next few months. I think him and that TENS guy both had the same, like, humbling, basically.
You think he's going to get back?
Oh, I don't know if he will. Like, I don't know much about him as a player. I saw a little bit. I thought he was probably overhyped. But then again, I don't blame people because that's people from within the NA scene who saw him at the other levels and were like, oh, no, he has potential. He could do it. My problem, as I always say, is, listen, there's a lot of, I'm sorry, but there are a lot of people with potential. The question is, can you make it at tier 1? And it's not like, I mean, there's plenty of players do make it at tier 1, but there's a certain like kind of a mindset or like an understanding of like who's going to be better than you, who's going to be worse, how to play when you're the worst player. These are things that you have to kind of like level up as you go, in my opinion. Like that's one of the things that makes that whole Ziwu story so incredible. Like it would have made a lot more sense as a story if he'd have been equally as good, but what he'd done was like, he would get to he would wreck everyone in the group stage, or he'd wreck every time he played like 100 Thieves or some of the lesser squads. I mean, the irony is 100 Thieves actually is the kryptonite to that team, but I'm just as an example, teams where you're better than all of them skill-wise. If you wrecked all of them, but then you kept having like a playoff series where it's like, oh, but where was he on all those maps? He kind of went away, didn't he? Well, next year. Give him more time. Like that would actually, that's the normal progression. What's crazy about that guy is he maybe had that for like 2 months and then was just banging everyone. So that's like extremely rare. Like I could legit count on, put it this way, I don't even have to say like I can count on one hand or something. Basically, if you think of the greatest players of all time, most of them did that, but that's why they're the greatest players of all time. Everyone else, usually there is that progression and that life cycle. And the problem for someone like SOM or TENS, as they both have this similar storyline, is they're still like, they're complete rookies as far as I'm concerned. I don't care that they played a couple of lands or one land or something. That doesn't count. To me, you're a rookie until you've played like at least like a full year of tier 1, or you've been on 1 or 2
until we've
teams.
seen you cry on stage.
That helps. Until you've shown some emotion. Yeah, there should be some sort of initiation ritual. Yeah, like that. Like, everyone shames you when you fail the LAN.
The nice thing is he's been a part of that weird ass envy experiment forever.
Yeah,
so it's
weird.
like you can't sink any lower than that one. Like, it's all downhill from here. You've gone through hell, and now here you are.
That's one of the teams that doesn't make sense because like Genji obviously weren't in Counter-Strike. They've just come in, tried to buy who they think are good players, and they haven't done a terrible job. Like obviously Adam Bennett at the end kind of turned it all around. Like, it's not as bad a lineup actually. The Cloud9 one is obviously banking on potential, like we've said. The Complexity one is he got the best players available that he could get at the time that would also move to NA that were European. So within those contexts, I'd say he did like, B job, B job, did a pretty good job. As if it has to be B job at the end, but whatever. It's a good episode this time. It's all fucking you.
Here you are banging people, B jobs.
Lovely.
Nailing them when they're still young, and all the fucking reasonable things. But here's the problem: is when you come to the Envy team, this is one where I feel like I have to explain some context to people. The problem is this: Envy the org has plenty of money. They are a team that has an Overwatch League slot. Like, they're a team with loads of investment money. The problem is, one, I don't think personally, if you look at the last year or so, that they're committed to CSGO at the moment. Like, I don't think it's one of their main games they're putting their money behind and that they want to make big moves in. I think for now, they're actually happy to just have like an all right roster and just see where it goes and maybe lock into a player. And then the idea with a team like that is you almost wait until they prove themselves, then you put the gas pedal down and you put the money in, you buy the players. So the problem I have with their team is, like, people will think because of how bad the squad was and how obviously disjointed it was, that, it was just like a budget team that had no money. I would guarantee those players got a decent salary. I would actually bet that team had more money behind it than people. Like relative to their performance level, they probably were one of the worst teams in the world. Like, dollar for dollar or whatever the fuck. So that's why that one's a shame, because that team doesn't even look like it has any way back or any real potential to become good.
There's only
frankly.
2 players currently on the lineup, as far as I know.
That doesn't help. I mean, you have to field 5 as a minimum. Yeah,
you must have 5.
I actually had a comment like that I did on Reddit. It was like a throwback to the true asshole Thorin of about 15 years ago that I've somewhat polished off the rough edges from, where someone on Reddit said I don't know if removing Guardian's enough though, and I put no. Yeah, I agree with you. You're not going to get much done with 4 players. You should have at least 5 in the server.
Here he is. He's trying to have a real discussion.
I know. Totally worthless.
Great answer. I'm really excited to interact.
Oh, no. The worst thing is, you remember how Reddit works? Like, everyone who isn't like me, who clicks disable, replies in the inbox or whatever, they're all getting the inbox reply. They see that check mark next to mine. They're like, oh shit, Thorin replied to me. Oh, what's he said? Some straight fire shit. And it's actually one of the few comments I've ever posted that I just had no information. It had nothing of value. It's almost like a Rick roll. You read it and you're just well, now I feel dumber for reading that. Fuck me.
What a waste of time.
Exactly.
I bet you probably got more upvotes than the guy.
Oh, I bet that's probably the saddest thing, Hawka, is knowing how Reddit works. That's probably like my tweet of the fucking month that probably just banged like a motherfucker. People are just like, look, he's just condescendingly mocking someone in a meme fashion. Upvote him. He will be our new king. I'm like the Emojin Joe, whatever the fuck of that culture at this point in time. Like, ride, my boys, ride!
What is your equivalent? What is your equivalent of spraying the fucking the shit in your mouth?
That like
chrome,
silver spray.
the
Probably
spray.
just doing that. Probably just smiling in a cynical manner. That's so evil that it becomes that little beak face. What's mad is, in real life, I've never done that except once, which is that picture that somehow they captured. If you remember, I had it as my avatar from Cluj-Napoca.
Yeah.
Somehow there was like actually like a freeze frame like photograph. Because that's the thing, it wasn't actually like a proper photograph. It was like someone took a freeze frame from the stream. Where no joke, I am actually doing that. Like that's how my face is. Yeah, it's like, and that was way after I started doing it, by the way. So it's like it's almost like that thing where, you know, people say there's like micro reactions or some shit. It's like that must be what my mouth is doing, like for a quarter of a second every time when I banter someone. But he just caught me in the moment. It's like that was it revealed. That was the essence of who I am. The Beak-Face. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Dane Cuskley, Dean Tanglis, Chi Mao, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, Peter the Feeder, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion and Mohammed, Alabdul, Razzaq. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to ask me a question in my monthly Patreon AMA. Would you like teasers on upcoming content that I'm doing? Maybe you want to take part in a discussion directly with me? Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description below.